Starting Chapter 4. The Book of the Western March. In the summer of 1236 of the Common Era, the new Mongol army mobilized to subjugate the far west region of Europe. Like a gathering avalanche, it moved leisurely at first. Couriers rode along the route to be followed by the army, assembling cattle herds. The road was cleared of obstacles, bridges built over the swifter rivers, and forage stored at regular intervals. Good grassland along the route was marked off to be kept for the grazing of the tumans, the divisions. When they should arrive, then ox-drawn wagons creaked along the route, loaded with the shaped timbers of the war engines and munitions. With these went a corps of Chinese engineers under the command of a Kaung Pao, a master of artillery. With him went sacks of saltpeter and sulfur, the ingredients of the new and still mysterious fire weapon, gunpowder. When the grass was dying north of the Gobi, the Tumans assembled from the different ordus and route marched to the west. They had 60 degrees of longitude to cover, and they took their time about it. The riders of the Tumans carried complete personal equipment. Each man had one or more for mounts. He had felt a cape and sheepskin-lined fur jacket for protection against the cold. For the horses, he had a lariat and picket ropes, which served to attach to the wagons and to draw them through swampy ground are upgrades. Sacks of barley and a nosebag, a pot for the riders' cooking, a short axe, a bag of salt, wax, a file, and needle and thread. The leaders must have had the men show them the yassa of Genghis Khan commanded, all the articles to be carried into battle. They must look at everything down to the needle and thread, and if in this inspection they come upon a soldier who lacks something, they are to punish him. Nothing in the mobilization was left to chance. The army went equipped for a march of several years. Heavy tents for shelter during storms were carried in the regimental wagon trains. The Mongols never knew the luxury of winter quarters because they were expected to operate in snow and extreme cold. The steppe-bred horses could forage at need for themselves, digging under light snow with their hooves to get at grass or moss. Moreover, the divisions of Subutai's army were made up from the peoples of the forest belt in the Midwest. They were Turks for the most part, Kyrgyz and Uyghurs, Karluks, snow dwellers, and roving Turkomans. There was only a nucleus of Mongols to stiffen the discipline of the new army. Few weapons could be seen while they route marched. Their chief arm, their bows, their horns strengthened, double-curved Turkish bow for power, and the short hunting bow for rapid handling from the saddle were put away, oiled in their cases. The bow case hung low on the left hip of the rider, while the arrow case was on the right side. In action, the warrior could draw and fire his arrows with a slight movement of his hands, with startling rapidity, and he was equipped with 3 kinds of arrows, ranging from the long, light flight shaft to the heavy, armor-piercing arrow with sharpened steelhead as broad as 3 fingers. Braced in his stirrups, he could fire a burst of these heavy arrows from the Turkish bow at a gallop, and he could fire to the rear almost as easily. But on the march, these steel-tipped arrows were carried on the pack animals. The peculiar long Mongol sword, light and slightly curving, a forerunner of the 19th century cavalry saber, was carried, oiled in its leather sheath, behind the rider's left shoulder. Some banners, regiments, were issued light lances with tufts of horsehair below the points or long hooks to pull antagonists from the saddle. But these hand weapons were seldom used. They were instruments of the final killing. After arrow fire had broken the resistance of the enemy, they were to the Mongols what the bayonet is to the modern rifleman. Like the weapons, armor was light and serviceable. Strips of oxhide that had been boiled and shaped to the rider's shoulders and body, often with a split apron of leather hanging from his belt over his knees. All leather was lacquered to keep dampness out. Iron bands strengthened the helmets without making them heavy, while a soft leather drop, studded with iron, protected the neck. Many of the banners had armored their horses with leather that guarded the animals' bodies without interfering with movement. Rarely, bronze and light iron plates shielded the horses' heads. Only the regiments of the Kashak, the guard corps, had shields for defense, and these were intended for use on foot at night. Such metal as had in his equipment the Mongol was expected to keep polished and oiled. His equipment as a whole was planned for actual service, and for one purpose: swift movement and power in striking during that movement. A discipline as unyielding as iron held together this mass of men. Death was the penalty for turning back during an action without an order, as it was for failing to give aid to an injured squad mate, and for neglecting to pick up any equipment dropped by a front file man. These squads of 10 had been in service together for years. The individual rider knew where his comrades were and what they would do under all circumstances. The Ung Khan, our squad leader, was responsible for the welfare of his 9 men. The leader of the first squad commanded his 100, and so on up to the general commanding a Taman of 10,000. If the officer of a regiment were killed, the leader of the second 100 would take over his duties without hesitation. Underlying this discipline was equality of all ranks. Once a campaign had begun, peacetime rank ceased to be. A dispatch rider on the road could order a Taman commander to dismount and take his horse. A veteran guardsman had privileges above officers of other branches of the service. A man of my bodyguard, Genghis Khan announced, is superior to a regimental commander of another division. If a regimental commander of the outer line disputes or fights with a Keshektu, he shall be punished. Who deserves losing his head shall lose it. Who deserves a beating shall have it. As a rule, commanders were kinsmen of the ranks serving under them, and banners were recruited from a single clan, preserving a vestige of the old tribal unit. The officers spent a lifetime with their men. Failure on the part of an officer meant disgrace for the remainder of his life. Anyone from the ranks might succeed him. Most of the officers now in the army had grown up under the star of victory. They shielded me, Genghis Khan had said. In snow and in rainy nights, as well as in battle, my descendants must cherish them as a monument of my making, and not offend them. A generation of victory had given the ranks unshakable confidence in their leaders. They believed that the spirit life of Genghis Khan had entered the standard of the army. With its 9 white horsetails, to this confidence was added a sense of safety. The first rule of the army was to bring the ranks back alive. In proportion to the terrible loss of life they had caused, the Mongols had suffered very little. The officers had been trained to be jealous of the safety of their men. The ranks felt equally confident of the highest command. The mounted bowman in the foremost patrol knew that he was moving in accordance with a definite plan that would destroy the enemy by strategy rather than hand-to-hand fighting. The